This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, The War Room, Part 10. When we left off, Q and LJ had been released from the slammer, and Q told Donovan and Pops Andy all about how they were able to make that happen. Donovan cracked a joke as always. Q let him know that he had something big in the works, and it was bacon in Angela's uterus. Over the last week, Angela's had 2 more sessions with Dr. Lopez, and the children have had their regular scheduled session as well. Angela has stuck to her guns and restricted Michael's access to his computer and focused all of her attention on reinforcing their relationships with God. So she has no clue that her husband and best friend are no longer on lockdown. Angela's back in Dr. Lopez's office, and she just let her know that she's emotionally better than she was when she arrived on the island more than 3 months ago. And Dr. Lopez asked, "What changed?" Angela said, "I've spent the last week in prayer. I've been praying with my children, watching their moods, and talking with them about how they feel and what they think. We've been reading Bible stories together using the Message translation because it's a lot easier for them to understand, and discussing the stories that we've been reading about." Dr. Lopez asked, "Which stories have you been reading with them?" Angela said, "Oh, we read just about all of the ones where the protagonist was just about out of options, had tried to do things his or her own way, and in the end came to understand that they needed to trust God. We also read a few where bad things happened for no reason that the people could tell, but the bad was used by God for good." The children were fully engaged in the stories of Noah and Job, Abraham and Sarah, Jonah, and my all-time favorite, Gideon. Dr. Lopez said, "Yep, all of the classics. So how's Michael been doing with not being able to research what's been going on back at home?" Angela said, "Surprisingly, he hasn't even mentioned it over the last few days. I was concerned that maybe he found where I stashed it, so I moved it to another spot, just to ensure that the changes in his mood that I detected weren't the result of any funny business." Angela and Dr. Lopez both chuckled. Dr. Lopez asked, "So, how are you feeling physically?" Angela said, "About the same, but I'm a little confused. If I am in fact pregnant, and if it happened immediately prior to us coming to Puerto Rico, then I wouldn't be more than about 4 months along. So there'd be no reason for my clothes to be fitting so snugly, or for me to avert my eyes anytime I pass a mirror or a window, because there's a little bulge at the bottom of my abdomen." Dr. Lopez asked, "Why would you need to avoid looking at your reflection?" Angela said, "Because I'm trying to give my husband the deference that I vowed to him on our wedding day." I know it sounds ridiculous. Dr. Lopez said, "No, I'm just asking. I wasn't clear. You receive absolutely no judgment from me for you choosing to trust God and your husband. The truth of the matter is that as long as you're doing both, that means that you still have hope. And hope is the light that the darkness of fear can't ever put out." Dr. Lopez allowed Angela a moment to absorb that, and then she said, "We went a different direction in our last 2 sessions. We talked about the immense losses that you've experienced. The loss of your father, your mother, your half-sisters, and the lack of closure that you have around the loss of your sister-in-law, Marcia. How are you feeling about all of that?" Angela said, "I've laid it all on the altar and given it to God." Dr. Lopez asked, "Do we need to explore that more? Or do you want to go back to walking me through the last few years?" Angela said, "You've given me a lot to think and pray about, and I promise I'm good on all of that. Where did we leave off?" Dr. Lopez checked her notes and said, "We left off at you and your husband leaving your reception early." Angela said, "Right. So we didn't attend any of the excursions the following day. We didn't even make it to Sunday morning church service, and we planned it. We didn't even leave the villa until it was time for brunch on Sunday. When my baby shared all of the stories about the excursions and church service, I attempted to remind them that they'd be going home that night with Nana Brenda, Grandma Bella, and Pop Pop's Andy, and that their father and I would be staying in Puerto Rico for another week. And right when I got to that part, Q informed me that we would be going on a 3-week honeymoon to Europe, and we'd be leaving the following day. Dr. Lopez asked, wait, how did he pull that off? I'd imagine that you didn't pack for the weather in Europe or to be gone for 3 weeks. Angela said, nope, I sure didn't. We actually left Puerto Rico with 1 suitcase each. We packed up everything we didn't need and shipped it home. And when we finally returned home, we each had 2 suitcases and a carry-on. When we arrived in Greece for the first leg of the tour, in Athens, Mykonos, and Santorini, I found a hand-picked selection of clothing hanging in the hotel closet. When we headed to the Italian leg of the trip, we toured Venice, Florence, and Rome. I packed the items that I hadn't worn. Q had the items that I did wear, laundered, and shipped back home. This process was repeated on the final leg of the trip, the Ireland-London leg, where we toured Dublin, Cork, Galway, and London. By the time we finished, I was all worn out, ready to go home and see my babies and get all moved into our new home. Dr. Lopez asked, wait, who picked out all of those clothes? Angela said, Q did, of course. That man has impeccable fashion sense, and he loves to remind me that some of his favorite things to do include dressing and undressing me. Dr. Lopez chuckled and just shook her head. We actually flew by private jet, and I was a little uncomfortable with that expense. We could have absolutely flown commercial. But then Q said, before we boarded the first flight, love, the last thing we need is to get caught, squeezed in a public bathroom on a commercial flight doing what we're going to be doing and end up on a no-fly list and arrested overseas. I had no idea that every time we boarded a flight or checked into a hotel, this man intended to reconsummate our marriage. But I absolutely enjoyed every minute of it. I also enjoyed all of the cities, the people we met, the sights we saw, and the food was just to die for. I wasn't ready to go home, but I was ready to go home. I missed my babies, and I needed to have a conversation with my girls. We'd gotten to know each other pretty well in the biblical way on our honeymoon, but there was still one area where I was hesitant to get to know my husband. If I knew nothing else, I knew that I would get the tips and encouragement I needed from Regina and Stephanie in order to go ahead and take that plunge. At that moment, Dr. Lopez was taking a sip of her water. She almost choked. Then she asked, is this something that you've never done before? Was that too personal? Angela said, yeah, I've done it before in my previous marriage. Now, I try not to make these kind of comparisons, but let's just say the packages were not the same size. Dr. Lopez said, gotcha. Angela said, anywho, by the time we got home, I was sufficiently spoiled, so I wasn't expecting any more surprises. Boy, was I wrong. When we got home, I was surprised to see that my husband had printed, mounted, and hung the family photos that we took at Stephanie's engagement party. Photos from my photo shoot with Essence in New York the day we got engaged, and some of the wedding photos. After we dropped our bags, checked in with the kids and Mom Brenda, and gave them the trinkets that we'd gotten for them in Europe, we headed to our master suite to unpack. When I went to go into my closet to hang up my clothes, I was in shock. Q had Donovan and Veronica design a custom closet and build it for me while we were gone. I was thinking that I was going to have to go back to the estate, pack up stuff, bring it over to the house, but he'd had all of my favorite pieces already moved in, hung up, and in drawers. He'd also purchased me a brand new wardrobe with accessories, shoes, bags, belts, and the like included. There was even an island with a bench, and the island was filled with all of my perfume and skincare items, my jewelry, scarves, hats, belts, and more. Then, attached to my huge custom walk-in closet was my study. When he opened the door to the study, I discovered that the room had been painted in my sorority and his fraternity's colors, royal blue and white, and it was fully furnished. I'd never even been in the room, so I didn't even realize how huge it was. On one side of the room was a brand new desk, executive chair, laptop, printer, shredder, mini fridge, a bookcase with all of my books from the estate. Across from it was a 50-inch smartboard with video capabilities so that I could hold virtual meetings at home. And underneath it was a display case with all of my sorority paraphernalia that I had accumulated over the years. On the opposite side of the room was a custom vanity with a LED light embedded mirror, a plush chair, and drawers filled with all of the cosmetics and skincare items I could ever need. There was also a ring light for my content, and behind the vanity along the wall was all of my vibrantly hued products, clearly on display in a way that was easy for it to be captured when I shoot video. I was so ecstatic. I was running from room to room, touching everything, opening up drawers, smelling new perfumes, admiring the jewelry, shoes, and bags. I ran back into the study and then out into the hallway, back into the master bedroom, back into the closet, back into the study. Q was laughing hysterically. He said I was running around like a kid in a candy store. When I finally stopped running around, I showered him in kisses. And then I realized that I'd been pampered for over a month and I hadn't gotten him anything. When I said as much, he looked at me and said, God has given me almost everything I've ever wanted in my life when he gave me you and our children. All I want is for you and them to feel at home here and not like you've moved into my house, but like this is our house. I told him honestly that I had felt at home since he had me decorate the place and made a space for my babies. Then he said, Love, you missed one more thing. I looked around and asked, what did I miss? Then he walked towards the window between the vanity and the wall and turned right, pushed on the wall, and it opened. When he led me inside, I saw that it was my very own war room. The small room was painted in a beautiful shade of purple. My favorite scriptures were all over the walls and vinyl decals, and there were photos of the people who I love, even people who are no longer here. He even hung a picture of Marcus. There was even a window in the room that faced east with a window seat where I could sit and watch the sunrise and pray in the morning. In the middle of the room was a beautiful tea table, a plush chair, and a tea set. A family Bible with both of our names and birth dates and our wedding date. The kids' names and dates of birth with room for more. A new journal, pens, pencils, highlighters, and everything I could possibly need to dig into my word. In the corner on the floor were sitting pillows, and across from it was shelving with everything that I would need for my next Bible study and room for my current Bible study materials. As the tears ran down my face, Q came over and pushed on the wall inside the war room. And that's when I realized that I could enter it from my study or my closet. I took the bottle of blessed oil from the shelf, applied the oil to my hands, anointed his head, and prayed for him and our family. When we stepped out of the room, he said, There is one thing that I need, love. I looked at him and said, Name it. He said, I need your help. Nervously, I asked, With what? He said, With Kristen in this house. Then Angela and Dr. Lopez lost it.